25,000 women. That was the number recorded after a single Roman conquest. Not soldiers, not rebels. Women counted, processed, distributed. When Rome defeated a city, its triumph did not end on the battlefield. It continued in markets, households, and imperial palaces. Behind the glory of legions and marble monuments stood a quieter system, efficient, legalized, and largely unspoken. This is the story of what happened after victory, and the machinery that turned human lives into instruments of empire. Rome did not build its empire on chaos. It built it on systems. From the early republic to the height of imperial rule, warfare was predictable. A campaign began in spring. A siege tightened through summer. A city fell. The spoils were calculated. Land was seized. Wealth was inventoried. And populations were categorized. Men of fighting age might be executed or enslaved in mines. Children could be absorbed as labor. But women, particularly young women, were processed differently. They represented labor, reproduction, domestic stability, and economic value. In Roman eyes, they were not incidental to conquest. They were central to it. Ancient sources describe staggering figures. After the fall of cities in Gaul, Greece, Judea, and elsewhere, captives were counted in the tens of thousands. One campaign alone reportedly yielded more than 50,000 enslaved people. In some records, 25,000 were specifically identified as women. This was not random brutality, it was policy. When a Roman general declared a city taken, discipline briefly gave way to sanctioned plunder. Yet even chaos had limits. Officers quickly reasserted order. Captives were assembled outside the walls. Scribes recorded numbers, age, physical condition, and perceived skills were noted. Beauty, fertility, and youth were not abstract traits, they were economic categories. Women were separated from men. The immediate trauma of separation was deliberate. Roman military culture understood psychological shock as a tool of control. Disorientation prevented coordinated resistance. Within days, captives began their journey along Roman roads towards slave markets in Capua, Delos, Ephesus, or Rome itself. There, the system formalized what conquest had begun. Roman slave markets were regulated spaces. Prices fluctuated according to supply, demand, and specialization. Agricultural workers fetched one value, skilled artisans another. Young women, particularly those deemed suitable for domestic service or elite households, commanded higher prices. Buyers were not only private citizens. Wealthy senators, equestrians, and imperial officials purchased captives in bulk. Some women entered domestic service as cooks, nurses, and attendants. Others were trained as entertainers. Some were forced into prostitution in regulated brothels that paid taxes to the state. The Roman Empire did not merely tolerate this trade. It profited from it. Slave labor reduced costs for elites, stabilized agricultural estates, and sustained urban luxury. Enslaved women performed invisible labor that freed Roman citizen women from household burdens, reinforcing class hierarchies within Roman society itself. Conquest abroad reshaped domestic life at home. At the highest levels, captives could enter the imperial household. The emperor's palace functioned as both residence and administrative nerve center. Within it existed a vast network of enslaved attendants, many of them women from conquered territories. Some served as personal maids. Others became musicians, scribes, or companions to imperial women. A few rose to positions of surprising influence. Intimacy, proximity, and discretion could translate into power. Yet this proximity carried danger. The imperial court was defined by suspicion. Rumors of favoritism, jealousy among consorts, and accusations of seduction could end lives. For women brought into the palace, Survival required more than obedience. It required political awareness. Rome's treatment of captive women reveals something deeper than exploitation. It reveals a philosophy. The Roman state believed in absorption. Conquered peoples were not meant to remain permanently alien. Over generations, they could become Roman through language, law, military service, and reproduction. Enslaved women bore children who inherited the status of the mother. Yet manumission was common. Masters could free enslaved individuals, granting them limited citizenship. Freed women often remained tied to former owners as clients. Over time, the children of freed captives might integrate fully into Roman society. This gradual assimilation served imperial stability. Rome converted enemies into subjects, subjects into citizens, citizens into defenders of the empire. But integration did not erase trauma. It institutionalized it. As Rome expanded, the influx of captives surged. By the late Republic, entire sectors of the economy depended on enslaved labor. This reliance created instability. Large estates staffed by enslaved workers displaced small Roman farmers, contributing to urban poverty. Revolts erupted, most famously the uprising led by Spartacus. Though primarily male-led, enslaved women were present in these movements, sharing in their risks and punishments. Fear began to shape policy. Mass enslavement was profitable, but it also concentrated resentment. Meanwhile, moralists in Rome voiced concern that luxury and dependence on slave labor weakened traditional Roman virtues. The empire's wealth was undeniable. Its ethical confidence was less secure. The destruction of Jerusalem in 70 CE marked a critical moment. Tens of thousands were taken captive. Women and children were paraded in triumph through Rome. Some were assigned to public works, others were sold. The spectacle was designed to demonstrate total dominance. But it also revealed something unsettling: the scale had become immense. Conquest was no longer a seasonal campaign. It was an industrial process. As expansion slowed in the 2nd century, the steady supply of captives declined. The empire began to depend more on internal reproduction of its enslaved population rather than external conquest. The system adapted. Fewer dramatic mass enslavements, more bureaucratic regulation. Violence did not disappear. It became normalized. Roman law codified slavery with precision. Enslaved women had no legal autonomy. Their bodies were subject to their owner's authority. Yet over centuries, subtle changes emerged. Philosophical schools such as Stoicism emphasized shared humanity. Later, Christianity introduced new moral frameworks that complicated the ethics of ownership. Imperial edicts in late antiquity modestly limited certain abuses. Marriage between enslaved persons gained partial recognition. The outright killing of slaves without cause became legally restricted. These reforms did not dismantle the system, but they signaled discomfort with its extremes. As Rome transitioned into a Christian empire, the language shifted. Brutal realities were softened in rhetoric. Triumphs became narratives of divine order rather than domination. Memory adjusted. The absorption of captive women reshaped the demographic and cultural fabric of Rome. Genetic studies suggest significant population mixing across the empire. Linguistic traces reveal regional influences within Latin dialects. Religious practices from conquered territories blended into Roman rituals. The empire's diversity was not incidental. It was produced by conquest. But this diversity was born from coercion. The hidden system ensured that Roman identity was constantly expanding, yet rarely acknowledged the violence that fueled it. Official histories celebrated generals and emperors. They seldom recorded the individual stories of the women who sustained households, bore children, and quietly transformed Roman society from within. Their anonymity was part of the design. Why does this system feel obscured? Because Roman historians wrote from positions of power. They detailed battles, speeches, and political rivalries. The logistics of enslavement were described as statistics, not human experiences. 25,000 women became a number in a triumphal record. Over time, repetition numbed moral scrutiny. What was routine did not require explanation. Modern audiences often inherit this silence. We admire Roman engineering, law, and architecture. We marvel at roads and aqueducts. Yet the empire's stability depended equally on an invisible labor force shaped by conquest. The grandeur and the suffering were intertwined. The Roman Empire did not invent conquest, but it perfected administration. Its genius was not only military strength, it was organization. The ability to convert victory into lasting advantage, to turn people into infrastructure. The story of those 25,000 women forces an uncomfortable realization. Empires endure not merely through force, but through systems that normalize force. Rome called it order. From the perspective of the conquered, it was something else entirely. Empires leave monuments. They leave laws. They leave languages that outlive them. But they also leave silences. Behind every triumphal arch stood lives redirected without consent. The Roman system ensured that conquest did not end with surrender. It continued in kitchens, nurseries, estates, and palaces. Power is rarely sustained by spectacle alone. It is sustained by structures that make domination appear ordinary. The question is not whether Rome was unique. The question is whether any great power escapes the temptation to convert human vulnerability into advantage. History remembers emperors. It rarely remembers the counted.